Hello, everyone. Today I wanted to argue that Severance is not a novel about a virus. I think Ling Ma is making a more disturbing argument than that. She's showing that capitalism ruins us, that it hollows people out, wears them down, and strips them of their sense of meaning before any disease shows up. By the time the Shen fever arrives, the damage is already done. The fever just makes it visible. When people think about Severance, they remember the zombies. But what kept standing out to me wasn't the outbreak, it was how normal everything felt before it. The frightening parts of the novel aren't the infected wandering through the empty stores, they're the descriptions of ordinary life, routine, shopping, production, because those descriptions already look like a kind of zombification. Start with how capitalism empties the meaning out of things. Before the apocalypse, Candace works in the Bible department at Spectra. A Bible is supposed to be one of the most meaningful objects a person can own. But in Severance, nobody treats it that way. During Candace's trip to China, a businessman explains that Bibles are good business, they are always in good style. He talks about scripture the same way he'd talk about shoes. The value of the object isn't its message anymore, it's the value that it sells. The pattern Ling Ma keeps returning to is that capitalism doesn't ruin the sacred by attacking it, but it ruins it by pricing it. And if the system can make something that meaningful unmeaningful, nothing is safe from the same treatment, including people inside of the system. The book makes that cost physical. In the Gemstone Bible factories, workers develop serious lung diseases from the dust, while the company worries more about the production moving on than protecting them. I don't think it's a coincidence that Shen fever also enters the body through breathing. Both the disease and the work attack the lungs. Long before the virus exists, capitalism is already making people sick. The system itself behaves like an infection. The outbreak doesn't introduce the sickness, it just removes our ability to ignore it. Then there's what the system does to the mind. Candace describes her daily routine, going to work, repeating the same mundane tasks, and admits, "It is the feeling I like best about working," referring to her zoning out. What stood out to me about it is that she isn't saying that she enjoys her work. She enjoys not having to think and just be mindless. Routine becomes comforting because it replaces choice with repetition. That's capitalism's quietest damage. It teaches people to prefer numbness over awareness. And that's where the zombies come from. Candace later calls Shen fever a fever of repetition, of routine. At first, it sounds like a description of the infected, but it's also a description of the world that's already going around them. The fevered aren't a different species, they're people whose routines kept running after all the meaning had drained out. On the factory floor, workers repeat identical motions over identical boxes on an endless conveyor belt. Later, the fever repeat their motions in the same way. That's why I think the real horror of Severance isn't the virus. Traditionally, zombies stand for horde consumption and mindlessness. Ma updates that idea. Her zombies aren't driven by hunger, they're driven by habit. They keep shopping, working, and repeating routines that capitalism trained them to do. By the end of the novel, Shen fever doesn't feel like a disaster that came out of nowhere. It feels like a conclusion. A world that had already taught people to live without meaning didn't have very far to fall. That's what makes Severance such an effective story. The fear it leaves you with isn't catching a virus, it's the suspicion that the system we already live inside had started ruining us a long time ago, and we were too busy keeping up to our routines.